The sound of my son's laughter used to be my favorite part of the morning. It filled our small living room, that tiny rented place where sunlight crept through the cracked blinds and the world outside still felt possible. But that morning, his giggles were cut short by a scream. Mine. Turn it down! My mom's voice exploded from the kitchen. She stormed into the room, her face red, her slippers dragging hard against the tile. My son, Ethan, only 6, froze mid-laugh, the cartoon still playing behind him. He had been sitting cross-legged on the floor, holding a half-eaten apple, smiling at the silly characters on screen. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video. Didn't you hear me? She barked, snatching the remote and slamming it on the coffee table. This house isn't your playground. Mom, he's just watching. I started, trying to keep my voice steady. Shut up, Emily. She turned her rage on me like a switchblade. You never learned respect, and now you're raising another useless one just like you. Ethan looked at me, confused, scared. Grandma, I'm sorry. Before I could reach him, she grabbed his chin harshly. Sorry? You think sorry fixes being annoying? You think this place is for freeloaders? Mom, stop! I shouted, lunging forward, but her hand moved faster. The crack of her palm against his small face echoed like a whip. Ethan stumbled, falling to the floor. For a second, I thought she'd stop there, but she didn't. She grabbed his jaw again, this time pressing her thumb against his mouth. You're just like her, she hissed, her voice low, venomous, loud, pathetic, and never knowing when to shut up. Mom, don't touch him. Her hand flew up again. Something glinted. My father's old steel comb, the one he used to keep in his pocket. She slammed it down near Ethan's face, hard enough to make him yelp and scramble backward, hitting his mouth against the edge of the table. There was a soft, wet sound, the kind of sound that stays in your head forever. He started crying. Blood ran down his lip. His front tooth had snapped halfway. My mother froze for a second, breathing heavy. Then she looked at him and laughed. Look at that, she sneered, wiping her hands. Maybe now he'll learn when to keep quiet. I felt everything inside me collapse. My knees hit the floor beside him. Ethan, baby, it's okay. Mommy's here, I whispered, pressing tissues against his mouth. That's when my dad appeared from the hallway, carrying his coffee like nothing had happened. He looked down at Ethan, then at me. What's all this noise now? He's hurt, I stammered. She hit him, his tooth. Dad glanced at Ethan's tear-streaked face, then smirked. He'll live. He's as dramatic as his mother. Dad? Maybe pain will teach him not to act like a leech, he added, sipping his coffee, his tone dripping with mockery. You really thought laughter suits this house? This isn't a daycare for failures, Emily. Ethan whimpered quietly. Grandpa, I didn't mean... Quiet, Dad snapped. Useless and loud, just like your mom. That word, useless, hit harder than I could describe. I'd heard it my whole life, when I cried as a child, when I failed a test, when I lost a job, when I became a single mother. It was their family motto. Remind her she's nothing. But that day, something inside me broke. I took Ethan to the bathroom, cleaned his face, and held him until his breathing steadied. His little hands clung to me like he was afraid to let go. His tooth looked worse in the light, chipped, swollen gum, his lips trembling. Mommy, he whispered. Did I do something bad? I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. No, sweetheart, you did nothing wrong. Grandma hates me. No, I lied softly. She just doesn't know how to love. But I did. I knew exactly what love wasn't. And I knew I wouldn't let that cycle continue. That night, I packed a bag. Only the essentials, clothes for Ethan, his school books, some savings, and the worn teddy bear my grandmother gave me years ago, back when kindness still existed in our bloodline. As I zipped the bag, my mom's voice cut through the silence. Where do you think you're going? Somewhere you won't find us, I said, not turning around. She scoffed. Don't start your drama. You'll crawl back again. You always do. Dad added from the couch. Take the boy if you want. He'll end up just as useless anyway. Maybe you can teach him how to beg better. Ethan flinched behind me, clutching my sleeve. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it would burst. I walked to the door, opened it, and didn't look back. The night was cold, the air heavy. Ethan was quiet, resting his head on my shoulder. I didn't know where we'd go, but I knew we'd never come back. Behind us, the door slammed shut. My mother's voice echoed through the walls one last time. "Don't come crawling back when you fail again, Emily." For the first time in my life, I didn't answer her. I just walked. Through the quiet streets, through my fear, through everything they tried to bury me with. Ethan's small hand in mine was the only thing that kept me steady. And as the night air bit through my skin, I whispered to myself, "They'll regret this. One day, they'll beg to enter the world they mocked me for building, but they wouldn't get that chance. Not ever again." When Ethan and I left that night, I didn't have a plan, just the weight of my son's small hand and a heart that had finally decided enough was enough. The streets were quiet, slick from a light rain, neon lights bleeding onto the pavement. I remember stopping under a dim street lamp, holding him close, whispering, "We'll be okay," even though I wasn't sure if it was true. We slept in the waiting area of a small bus terminal that first night. I used my jacket to cover him, his tiny fingers still curled around my wrist. Every time he whimpered, I thought about how my mother's hand had trembled, not from guilt, but from anger that he dared to laugh. That thought burned hotter than hunger ever could. By morning, I found a help center that directed us to a family shelter. The woman at the counter, round glasses, soft voice, looked at my swollen eyes and said, "You don't need to explain. You're safe here." I almost broke down right there. The room they gave us had peeling paint and a flickering light, but it was the first place in years that didn't reek of fear. Ethan clung to my waist the first few nights, waking from nightmares, crying about Grandma's face. I held him tight and promised, "She'll never touch you again." I got a part-time job at a bakery a few blocks away. Early mornings, minimum wage, but honest work. Ethan stayed in the shelter daycare while I learned to bake bread, clean ovens, and ignore the ache in my back. Every loaf I pulled from the oven felt like a small victory. Every paycheck, no matter how small, was a piece of my dignity returned. Months passed. We moved into a small basement apartment, 2 rooms, thin walls, but it was ours. I saved enough to fix Ethan's chipped tooth. When he smiled afterward, my chest tightened. He looked like himself again. Then came the phone call, a voice I hadn't heard in almost a year. "My father." "Emily," he said flatly, as if nothing had happened. "Your mother's not well. We might lose the house. We need help." I stood there in the kitchen, flour still on my hands. My throat tightened. "You need help?" He sighed impatiently. "Don't start that tone. We just need a small loan. You're working now, right?" A laugh escaped me, low and sharp. "Working, yes, because I didn't have a choice." "Watch your mouth, Emily. We're still your parents." "No," I said quietly, my voice steady for the first time in years. "You're the people who taught me what not to become." I hung up. My hands were shaking, but I wasn't crying. Not anymore. A few weeks later, I received another call from my sister. She said Dad had gambled away his pension trying to cover mortgage debt. Mom's health had declined, and the bank was moving in. They were being evicted. That night, as Ethan colored quietly at the table, I stared at him, the light of our small lamp reflecting in his eyes. The thought hit me like a spark. They were about to lose everything, and I finally had the chance to decide whether they'd ever rebuild. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to seek revenge in fire or fury. No, mine would be quiet, strategic, poetic. I started researching. Within weeks, I discovered that my parents' house was listed for foreclosure, available for private purchase. The same house where my son's laughter had been silenced. The same living room where they'd humiliated me. When the sale opened, I didn't hesitate. I bought it, not to live in it, not to fix it, but to own it. And then I waited. 2 months later, there was another knock on my door. My father stood there again, thinner now, eyes sunken. "We've been told to vacate," he muttered. "Can you help us, Emily?" Ethan peeked from behind me, now healthy and strong, holding the same stuffed bear he'd clutched that night we left. "Help you?" I asked softly. "You mean, like you helped me when I begged you not to hurt my child?" He didn't answer. His eyes darted around the small apartment, taking in the warmth, the peace, the life I'd built. "I bought your house," I said finally. He blinked. "What?" "I own it now," I whispered. "And you're not welcome there, or here, ever again." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The weight of realization hit him slowly, crushing him the way he once crushed us with words. I closed the door quietly, not out of anger, but finality. That night, while Ethan slept, I sat by the window and watched the rain return, gentle, steady, washing the city clean. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just breathed. They had built a legacy of cruelty, and I had taken it away, without shouting, without vengeance, without violence. Just silence, the same silence they once gave me. Winter crept in slowly that year, the kind that made the air taste metallic and the nights stretch endlessly. I was in the kitchen that morning, pouring cocoa into 2 chipped mugs when Ethan looked up from his homework and asked, "Mom, are Grandma and Grandpa still mad?" I froze. The question came out of nowhere, gentle and curious. I set the kettle down and knelt beside him. "No, baby," I said softly. "They're not mad. They're just learning what happens when you hurt people and call it love." He nodded, too young to understand, yet wise enough to know it was the truth. It had been 6 months since I bought the house. I hadn't seen my parents since that day at my door, though sometimes I caught whispers, a neighbor mentioning how the once proud couple who threw family dinners every Sunday were now living in a rundown motel on the edge of town. I didn't check on them. I didn't need to. Some storms no longer deserved attention. One evening, while closing the bakery, I found an envelope slipped under the door. My name was written in my father's handwriting, the same slanted scrawl that once signed detention slips and threats. I stood there for a long minute before opening it. Inside were just 2 lines. "Your mother's in the hospital. We have no one else. Please, come." I didn't cry. I didn't even sigh. I just sat down at one of the tables, the scent of sugar and bread heavy in the air, and thought about all the nights I'd begged them for help and heard silence in return. But I still went. The hospital was cold, the lights too white, the corridors echoing with distant beeps and shuffling shoes. When I walked into her room, she looked smaller, hair gray and thin, eyes dull, voice barely a whisper. Dad sat by her side, hunched over, wringing his hands. He looked up, his mouth trembling. "Emily, you came." I stood at the foot of the bed, calm, steady. "You called." Mom turned her head weakly. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time in my life, I saw something unfamiliar in them. Not control, not anger, not superiority, just emptiness. "I didn't mean for things to go like this," she croaked. "I wanted you to be strong." I almost laughed. "By breaking me?" Tears slid down her cheek. "I was wrong. About you. About everything." Dad's voice cracked. "We've lost everything, Emily. The house, the money. We have nowhere left to go." I looked at both of them. "That's what happens when you burn every bridge you ever built." He leaned forward, desperate. "Please, just help us get back on our feet. One last time. We're still your parents." I studied him, the same man who once sipped coffee while my son bled, the same man who called us leeches as he watched me leave into the rain. I thought of Ethan, sleeping soundly in his warm bed, never hearing the cruelty that shaped my silence. "You're right," I said finally. "You are my parents, but that doesn't make you family." Dad's mouth fell open. "Emily," I took a slow breath. "You taught me that love is earned. You taught me that weakness is punished. You taught me that compassion is for fools. I learned every one of those lessons from you. But here's the thing." I leaned closer. "I unlearned them all." Mom began to cry, shaking her head. "Please don't do this." I'm not doing anything, I said quietly. You did this, years ago. I took a folded paper from my coat pocket and placed it on the side table. It was the property deed to their old house, now legally mine. You wanted shelter? It's gone. You destroyed it long before I bought it, and you'll never walk through its doors again. Dad reached for the paper, but I pulled it back. No, you don't get to own what you ruined. Mom's voice broke. We have nowhere to go. I stood tall, my voice steady, but not cruel. Then, maybe, for once, you'll understand what it's like to be left outside, to feel the cold you made us live in. They both looked at me, hollow, broken, and I walked away, not out of hatred, but freedom. As I stepped out of the hospital, snow began to fall, soft flakes catching in the yellow streetlights. I tilted my head up and let one land on my cheek. The air felt clean, quiet. When I came home that night, Ethan was waiting, half asleep on the couch. He sat up when he saw me. Mom, did you help them? I smiled faintly, in my own way. I said. He blinked. Are they better now? Maybe, I whispered, pulling him into my arms. But we are. He fell asleep against me, his small hands clutching my sweater. And as I held him, I realized something that settled deep in my bones. Revenge didn't have to be loud or cruel or seen. Sometimes it was as simple as this: a warm home, a child's safe laughter, and the knowledge that those who once called you worthless now sat in the dark, haunted by what they'd thrown away. That was the kind of revenge that lasted forever. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.